heaven.
What's up? What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Rendas, also known as Ricky Varandas, and a great episode for you today. Today, we have author Michael Andrukonis, and this is a fascinating guest because he's a friend of mine. He's somebody that I've known for a while, and we would always have super fascinating conversations. Then one day, he told me he was in the process of writing a book, and once I found out what the book was about, and some of his life journeys and stories that he shares in the book, I knew he'd be a great fit for the Ripple Effect Podcast. I know it's been a while since the last episode of the Ripple Effect Podcast. Life has been extra busy of late, so I'll keep this intro short. I'll put links in the show description to Michael and his book. I'll also put links to ways and methods of supporting the Ripple Effect Podcast if you find any value out of these shows and episodes I bring to you. Of course, I'll remind you this is a value for value show. So if you get some value, please consider sharing some value with the show. Rate, review, subscribe on all the platforms we're on, or you can send a donation or join our Patreon page. So that's it, guys. Enjoy this amazing conversation, and I'll talk to you guys on the next one. Peace.
I suppose, growing up in Poland, which was very difficult, of course. Like we used to live on the eastern part of Poland, but then after the war, the Russians took over that area, and we were kind of excluded from that area. The Polish nationals were not exactly invited, in that area. So we kind of had to move. So we moved west to a portion where it used to be Germany. And after the war, a section of that Germany, this particular town became Polish. So in other words, we lost a big region on the eastern side, but gained some on the western side from Germany. And so we moved. We moved, out of that, eastern part into a town called Ochla. That's how you pronounce it, Ochla. It's a very small town. Right next to the German border, and the vestiges of German architecture and everything else was there. I mean, literally, we felt as invaders at first. In other words, we're infringing on people who kind of stayed behind. I mean, a lot of people left, but some ones that stayed behind, they viewed themselves as like, hey, listen, I've been living here for generations. Now you're coming over and taking over my land. That was the attitude they had. Plus there were the Aryans, they were better than us, so at the same time, we lost a lot of people in the war because of Germany and Russia and all that stuff. And so there was resentment going both ways. But at the same time, we had no choice. We have to live together and, coexist, basically.
Yeah. So how young were you when during this, and how
I was about 4 or 5 years old when we moved to the western part of Poland. Yeah, and it was a very difficult time. Not only it was a different area, but my parents, my mother was always sick. Now she was a great woman. I wish I had known her better. She seemed to be in and out of hospitals, very, frequently. And my father was a total a-hole, to put it bluntly. A severe drunk, very short temper, and he would just lose it. When he came home, he would just beat the hell out of anybody in his sight, basically, for no reason. So as being small kids and all that stuff, you just couldn't understand how your parent would do that to you for no reason at all. It isn't like I got in trouble or whatever, and so therefore I got punished. Okay, there's sense there. Okay, uh, but he just was one of those guys who had a very difficult life himself, as I explained in the book. But that is no excuse for what he did to the whole family.
Situations like that are super scary. And I grew up in, as you know, a town called Ludlow, and I'm sure the listeners hear me refer to it from time to time. So just about everybody I grew up with was either Polish or Portuguese. That were like basically
Right.
your last names were Gomes, Diaz,
Yeah,
Gonzalez,
right,
or
right.
it ended
Yeah.
with a ski. That was like the typical thing. And one of my best friends who I started the podcast with initially, Dave Kornacki, Polish, and he talked about the struggles his mother had with his father. What do you think it is about the Eastern Europeans, or maybe Polish people specifically? Do you think it's because of that saying her people, like where he was dealing with some internal trauma, and people of that generation dealt with stuff, and maybe alcohol became a way to self-medicate? Maybe they
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Alcohol was the only outlet they had. I mean, and it was abused continuously. I mean, it was a way to kind of temper the daily misery. It was a very difficult life, and you get up in the morning and there was nothing to look forward to. Here we go again. So you get the bottle, basically. Yeah. The thing is, like, don't forget, Poland was communist during that time. So you didn't have much freedom, and you wouldn't want to speak out because you could have been arrested and jailed and who knows what. And then you get the church, which was very strict also. And my father, I called that the Trinity of fear, the three. You know, uh, and the thing is, we lived in constant fear. Church, father, and the Communist Party. There was no way out, no relief. And as a kid, and like, and then my mother passed away. And so now the only, structure or whatever I had in my life was gone, just ripped, you know, from the whole family, basically. And, one of the most difficult things I observed, and it's still ingrained in my mind, is we slept in the same room where my mother laid in a coffin, open coffin. There was no funeral homes or anything like that in Poland during that time, right? And so, open casket is my mother. You get up in the morning, here's your mother laying there. I mean, to a small kid, that's a mind blower.
how did you deal with that? Did you kind of just did you get you, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it, did you get used to it? Did you understand like life and death, or were you kind of confused with like, hey, this person was just here, now they're not?
Right. Well, the thing is, like, it was typical for whoever died to be at home in open casket for like 3 days until the priest came over, and blessed them or whatever, and they closed the casket and see you later. Uh, but the fact that my father was so abusive and then my mother passed, that really, you know, hit home. And it's one of those permanent moments where you just don't forget. You put it in the back of your mind, life goes on, but it's still there. You know,
Well, I think that's how trauma works. It is, there's been times on this podcast where I end up sharing a story, and then it kind of sparks a memory that was, somewhat traumatizing, or a negative memory that, like you said, I almost forgot it was there, and then it just took this story that created this image in my head where I was reliving, my childhood, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh wow, that's still there. Like that trauma, that experience is still there. And I think a lot of, what we do to deal with that is try to forget about it. And forgetting about it means like it's not gone. It just means it's like trapped away somewhere. And
exactly. Yeah, it's in the back burner. but it's always there. And the thing is, like, I thought I was relatively normal, growing up in the United States, high school and then college. Well, when I finished college, I realized something's not right. The
How old were
demons
you
from
when
the
you came to?
past were coming, back.
No, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I just wanted to. You came to America. How old were you when you came to America? Just so
I
people
was
could.
13 when I came here. 13. The whole family was six kids and my father, who didn't want to come because he had a lover back in Poland that he didn't want to leave behind, so to speak.
And Polish women are beautiful. So what brought him to America to leave his
Well, well, put it this way here: he was an abuser, a drunk, and a womanizer. The family was always the last, and not only that, but abused to the max. And
what type of trauma do you think he was dealing with? You think it was from the war? Do you think
well,
he his
the trauma that he dealt with when he was a young man, in the eastern part of Poland where we used to live, this town called Radun, that's how you pronounce it in Polish. He was enslaved by the Germans in a ghetto, in a Jewish ghetto, basically. And during that time, a lot of young people, young Polish nationals, whatever, were enslaved to work in slave labor at these camps. And his duty was to literally bury guys that came before him. In other words, the Germans viewed these people as not trustworthy or whatever. In other words, you did your job for like, say, 3, 4 months, and after that, you're gone. They'll kill you. And so the next guy comes in and buries that person, kind of a thing. So it was a matter of time before someone else came over to bury my father, literally. And another thing that he did is he used to walk around with a pail and a pair of pliers. And he would make the rounds and remove gold teeth from Jewish dead people. I mean, that'll freak anybody out, right? I mean, that's a mind blower. That was his job. He would make rounds the whole day, pulling out teeth. So his life was very invisible, and it's I totally understand that. Very tough life. But then I go back again to the abuse, and I cannot reconcile that at all. It just makes no sense to me now or then or whatever. It just, you know, I just don't get it.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because it's when are people responsible for their own actions? I've done lots of episodes on child trafficking and rapists, pedophiles, and that conversation it's sometimes get brought up. Like you find out about this monster of a human being who was a innocent little child who was tortured and traumatized by a monster, right? And so
Right.
in a way you almost sympathize with them, but yet they've
Right.
tortured and traumatized other people. So it's like when do we pump the brakes and say like somebody has to be responsible for their actions? And even if though you can understand or you can try to understand where those actions came from, it doesn't justify it, right? And and I guess as adults, it is hard because both you and I think probably have better relationships with our kids, and probably have taken some things we like from our parents, but kind of filter out the things we didn't like. And I have a hard time looking back at my upbringing and saying like, hey, how did my mom get that mad at me? How did she, how was it hitting kids so okay? How was this or that? And but and then I'm like, okay, they're a creature of their environment, right? So I hear stories about my grandparents, and they were even worse. And I hear and I'm sure their
Yeah.
parents.
Well, but at least there was a reason. See, in our case, there was no reason for his abuse. In other words, if I get in trouble, whatever, and he abused me, okay, you might say, well, at least there's a reason there. But you can't justify just getting wasted and coming home, very short temper. And of course, he had his own demons, but that gives him no right to be abusing anybody else. Period.
No, it definitely doesn't give him any right, but I can see, you can kind of start to understand, okay, he was a hurt person, right? That's what it sounds
No
like.
question. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I make it a point of that in my book. And as a matter of fact, he saved my life once. When I was like 5, 6 years old in Poland, I ran after a boat onto the street and I got hit by a truck in my head. And so I was totally out, losing a lot of blood, and transfusion was the only way out. And his blood type matched mine. So he literally saved my life.
Well, what's crazy is if somebody sees you at the gym, you're probably one of the most fit people, of not just your age, but of any age. You're always working out. You're lean. You're in shape. You're muscular. But you have been in quite a few accidents, and
Oh,
from
yeah.
roofs. I read that in your book.
Yeah.
Some of the your accidents, 2 major car accidents.
Right, right.
It's amazing what the human spirit can do, because I'm sure recovery from any of these things must be mentally just as, if not more, difficult than the physical aspect of it.
Oh, no question about it. Especially the first time when I fell and I broke my pelvis in 4 different spots. Fell off a two-story roof. I tell you, I've never experienced that kind of pain in my life before. I mean, that was excruciating pain. I mean, I can't describe it. Just thinking about it, yeah, I can't do it. So yeah, I going through that process, ending up in a hospital for a week and then a nursing home for 2 weeks. And being in a nursing home, I was the oddball because this particular nursing home was geared towards very old people, sick people, literally on a deathbed, some of them, you know. And here I am, it's like, who's this guy? So, when I was eventually able to, stand up and get in a wheelchair, I went out in the hallway, started cruising around, and I got some really strange looks from other people, like, who's this guy disturbing the flow of the day, kind of a thing. You know what I'm saying?
So when you came to America, you were 13. You came with your siblings, your father. Where did you live, and like how was it adapting to the new country and new
Oh
language and new
yeah, yeah.
environment and
Well, yeah.
culture?
So my uncle and his daughter picked us up in Springfield. We literally took a boat from Gdynia, which is a seaport in Poland, through Denmark, and then into the open sea, and ended up in St. Lawrence Seaway in Montreal. We took a train from Montreal to Springfield, and then in Springfield, my uncle, my father's older brother, picked us up with his daughter. Now, so they had 2 cars. I mean, we never rode in a car in our lives before. And there's 2 cars there. I go, what is that in itself was a major eye opener. And the thing that I couldn't understand is how people were friendly, like, hey, how you doing, Bob? You helping this and that. Cheerful faces, wearing colorful clothes, tall buildings. It's like a whole different planet. As a kid, it's like, whoa, yeah, 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 amazing. And even like being on a ship for like 10 days, from Poland to Canada. I mean, I saw this one lady swimming, right, in a swimming pool on a ship. And I'm thinking to myself, how is this possible? Wouldn't the ship sink? Well, the water in the, from a kid's point of view, then I'm thinking to myself, you know what? She's from the upper class. She knows how to swim because we didn't know how to swim either. So it's like, it's a whole different class of people kind of thing, you
It's
know?
funny because so much of your story reminds me. So I came to America when I was 4, but my parents, very similar, and you're a similar age as my father. My father was born, I believe, in '59, and same thing. Like I remember going back to Portugal every year, and he was raised in a home with no running water, no bathrooms. You had
Oh,
out,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
everybody went to what we call it the pusu to go wash their clothes, and
The,
where
the outhouse and
yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah, and you see all the women from the villages coming and washing their clothes together
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
well, and chit chatting and whatnot. And so when I hear your story, it reminds me a lot of that, and just it kind of makes me think like, what my parents, because my parents, same thing. Like nobody had a TV, nobody had a
Of
car,
course, yeah,
nobody had
right.
any of these things. And it's funny because one thing I would hear a lot growing up would be, oh, we sacrificed so much for you guys to, to have
Better
this
life.
life. And I would reflect on that. And I'm like, you know what? They came to a country where they didn't, I mean, they don't read the language or speak the language now. They definitely didn't do it back in the late 80s, early 90s when they first came here. And I'm like, to come to a country where you can't even read the signs, you can't even, like, it has to be scary. It has to be traumatizing. And, this is maybe another subtopic I'd love to get into and just get your perspective. But, like, as I get older, I start questioning. I'm like, okay, in their heart, they felt like they did the right thing, right? Like they came to America to
Sure.
financially get ahead, give their kids a better life, give them.
That was the whole purpose.
That was the whole purpose. And then as I get older, I think about every time I would go back to Portugal, right? And now, you and I have talked a lot about this, about like technology and where the world is heading. And I remember just going back every summer. That's where I would spend my summers. People would go to Florida, people would go Cape
Sure,
Cod.
sure.
I would go back
Yeah.
to Portugal. That's literally, and I would hate
Oh,
it.
yeah.
I would hate it because literally all we would do is the same thing we did in America, is that we sit around with family and ate and drank. Like that's, so like I would go to Portugal. We would, fly into Lisbon where my uncle lived. We would stay with him for a little bit. His
Yeah.
sons were huge sporting fans, and that's how I became a sporting fan. I would see the logos everywhere, and I'm like, oh, I like that. I like that team. That's my team. And then we would drive all the way up north to where near Chaves, where I was
Yeah.
born, and then we would just be in farms. We'd be on farms, and I would hang out with cousins, and there'd just be animals, and there wasn't a whole lot else to do besides be outside and hang out with cousins or whatever. And then as a kid, I'd be like, wow, man, like we're like kings and queens compared to like the way my parents grew up and the way they live there. And then as I get older and life gets more stressful and you're an adult and you buy all these material things and you're like,
Right,
you
right.
realize how empty, you still kind of feel, and like nothing's giving you like permanent happiness. It's all like temporary happiness. And you live in this cycle of like buying things you don't need that make you happy for a little bit of time. And then when that happiness goes away, you have to work some more to buy some more things you don't need to make you, and then I look back and I reflect on my travels back to Portugal, and I think to myself, I'm like, all my cousins and family in Portugal who didn't have any of the things that I have here, they were happier than I was, and they were like, there was no signs of anxiety or depression or stress, and everybody was outside all the time. You always and I'm like, okay, what do they have that we didn't have? Because I look around, I'm like, I have way more things, I have more
Right, right,
material things.
right.
But I'm like, the thing that we don't have,
No connections.
no connection, no community, right?
Right,
No,
exactly.
and
Yeah,
and and
you're
that
right.
was, so now I look back and I'm like, wow, we kind of been tricked into, thinking that this is the path to happiness, and you go down the path and you're like, oh no, this isn't that. Like there's more. There's more to life, and if we think this is going to bring us happiness, you're going to be lost, and hopefully by the time you figure out that that you're wasting a lot of time trying to um buy your way into happiness and work your way into happiness, hopefully it's not too late to kind of rethink things and live your life a little better.
Yeah, I mean, back in Poland, there, you're right. The community, the family was it. Not our family, but in general, the family was it. And we lived close to earth, close to the land, so to speak. In other words, like a lot of times you get hungry in the summertime, you go to the garden or whatever, grab an apple, make a salad, right from from nature to mouth, basically. You know, and that's how it was. I mean, and that was in a what I'm saying is like being fed was sort of happiness, if that makes any sense, because you didn't have to worry about the next day. In other words, if your family provided food and they loved you and all that stuff, that was it. That was the key. Uh, but coming to United States, like we didn't know any English, so like we had to learn from first grade books and this and that, blah blah. So that itself was a kind of difficult situation. And trying to integrate within the American society, so to speak. Uh, but at the same time, a lot of people came along and gave us a hand. I read about this particular lady, Mrs. Barringer. Okay, she lived in a town nearby us, And I ended up cutting the grass for her, on weekends, right? And at the lunchtime, we would have tea and sandwiches or whatever, and she would take out pictures from newspaper of me playing soccer and just give them to me. I'm saying to myself, wow, it's like, why is she doing this? A relative stranger. And then she goes, are you going to be voting in the upcoming elections? I go, no, I'm not a citizen. Plus, I have no clue what's going on as far as politics whatsoever. She goes, well, we got to do something about that. The following weekend, she gave me a booklet to study to become a citizen. And then after that, she brought me to the swearing ceremony. I mean, so I'm raising my right hand and I look into the audience. I see Mrs. Brown today with a big grin on her face. She was like a happy mother, so to speak. She was like almost like a surrogate mother at that moment, with a very genuine smile and just a pleasant person. And she wasn't doing that for almost selfish reasons. She just how she was. I mean, that was the person.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because something that I remember really well is how much my parents appreciated all the people, and they know them by name, and they would always reference it. They would always remind me that these specific people were the ones who helped them when they came to America first. The ones who helped them get work, help them get
Right.
a house, helped them
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
and it stuck with them forever. They just really, really appreciate the people who, like you said, for no, and some of them were distant family, but
Sure.
the people who
Yes,
really,
see, to me, that was something it was really strange, because I'm thinking like, why are they doing this? Because the father that I had, and then a stranger does this, you go, what is the motive? You don't trust the genuine attitudes from them. It just you question that because you're not used to it.
yeah, it's funny how it almost seems like if you're not used to people being unselfish or generous, when people are, you get skeptical. Like, why?
Yeah, right,
It,
exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
no, yeah, it's yeah, and I was, yeah. Uh, but my uncle, I mean, this guy was a saint. Age of 72. His generation at 72 was either dead or literally on a deathbed. You follow me? Yet he had the audacity to emigrate seven lost souls from a whole different world. Amazing. I mean, people like that. I'm like still, awed by it. It's, what a great person he is. And very different character than my father. You know, just he was a quiet person. He worked on his garden a lot. He wasn't a drinker. He would take a shot of vodka like once in a while in the afternoon, and that's about it. And he was very frugal. I remember him smoking a cigarette, right to the very end. You burn his lips sometimes. He was extremely frugal. But I tell you, he was well established, and I tell you, he literally rescued us. It's amazing.
so when you came to America, how long before it felt like your new home was your home?
Well, the thing is, what helped us along is I met a guy who lived on the other side of a common that was, between various houses and all that stuff. And we became good friends. And he introduced us to a boys club, Barry Boys Club. And went there religiously and played basketball and pool and this and that and learned English as we went along at the same time. So as that went along, and then I started playing soccer in high school, I became more feeling part of the team, part of America, part of the society kind of a thing. You felt more as one of them rather than from the outside looking in.
Was there a lot of
So
pull?
sports,
Yeah, sports is huge. Yeah, for
yeah,
community to build friends,
yeah.
social skills. It's amazing. I mean, I'm sure you're very similar to like me, where I have like friends that I've made from soccer, friends I've made from basketball, friends I've made from music, friends I've made from podcasting. It's like there's all these little communities, and if you dip your toe in those communities, you can be a part of it and make some new friends. So, how many at that time? Because I know, like in Ludlow, where I grew up, there was obviously a lot of Polish and Portuguese when I was growing up. Was there at your time when you came to America? Was there also a lot of Polish coming, and did you make Polish friends, and did you guys stick together and help each other through?
Well, you know what? The town we lived in, which was Barry, we lived in a section of Barry. It's called Barry Plains, a very small village. Uh, there wasn't too many Polish people there. It was mainly Italian and Irish. So we were not in a Polish community per se, although I would say 90% of the people that came to the United States from Poland, they went right to that Polish community. And, and the church was the center of that community, kind of a thing. Portuguese, same deal. But we were not in that situation until I moved to Western Mass, and then I was exposed to more of the Polish community, but not for the reason of trying to learn the language or whatever. It just they were all around you basically.
Did you move to Western Mass when you went to college? Is that when you end up moving here?
Yeah, after college, I had various jobs and this and that, and I met this girl from Western Mass, and so that kind of, didn't work out too well. Uh, but I moved to Western Mass mainly because I quit my job that I had near Boston area. I was kind of fed up with the whole structure there, and the union came in. It was us against them kind of situation. It just was not good. So I quit and I moved to Western Mass, and I bought a house with my sister and my brother-in-law, a two-family house that we split half and half. And that's how I ended up in, Western Mass. And then I worked for a couple of dealerships, car dealerships, which totally sucked, was awful. But I had to do what I had to do. I had to find a job, go from there. Then I've done quite a few other things, and even joined Amway. I'm not sure if you ever heard of them, but
what's that?
Amway. Yeah, you ever hear Amway? No.
I feel like I know the name. I don't know.
Yeah, it's basically a company that sells various products, via other people. It's home good products, basically. It's still around. It's been around for a long time. But so I've tried various things, didn't pan out, and at the same time, I started feeling worse and worse. Depression, anxiety, and all that stuff. It just the demons from the past were showing their ugly face, so to speak. And I had to deal with that, and it was not easy, believe me. I was drugged up most of the time. Try this, try that, that kind of deal. So I was like not in good shape. Literally resorted to staying at home and just kind of keeping to myself and afraid to go out, anxiety like you wouldn't believe. And eventually I found a way out of it. In other words, like I tend to be on the hyper side. So I tried this routine where I would kind of sit there every day for like maybe half an hour or so and just close my eyes and just kind of like try to let go. And once I started doing that, it developed into Time Out in Heaven, I call it. Now, it's a breathing exercise, but a lot more than that. But simply put, that's what it is. And I do it on a daily basis. And I finally got to a point where it's very difficult to explain or define, mainly because you don't know how it is unless you're there yourself. If that makes any sense. You get to a point where you're not thinking about anything, just the present, and they're feeling so good. You're in bliss, basically.
Well, they say, and I say this to my daughter. My daughter had a issue last school year where she would have like these crazy panic attacks and anxiety, and we'd have to pick her up from school. And I would always tell her, I'm like, listen, depression is pondering on the past, anxiety's pondering on the future. Happiness is being in the now. And that's where you have to be. I'm like, you can't spend too much time pondering in the past. You'll get depressed. You'll think about your mistakes. You'll think about bad decisions. You'll think, and you can't stress about things that haven't happened yet. And just try to be in the now. It's like that quote, they call it the present because it's a gift. It's like, try to
Yes. See, that's the whole thing. Like, living, but you know how difficult that is, not to worry about the past or concerned about the future or whatever. And it also depends on your makeup and where you're coming from. Some people find it easier, others very difficult to deal with. But you can change. And the mind is very malleable, in my opinion, and I'm a good example of that. Coming from like a really nasty situation, but through hard work and perseverance, basically doing it on a regular basis. You know, uh, but you're right. Living in the present is the key, because if you're living in the past or the future, you're missing the present, obviously. And time goes by. You turn around, time is gone. You can't get it back.
Yeah, I say that all the time. The one thing you can't
Yeah.
make more of is time. It's so there's a movie that I used to reference all the time because the movie was okay. It wasn't like it was a great movie, but the concept was what I found the most interesting. And it was this movie called In Time, and it was a movie where every human on their wrist could see their life clock going backwards, right? So pretend you had on average 100 years of life, right? You could see those hours just clicking backwards on your wrist. So you could tell, oh, I got 10 years and 2 days and 6, minutes left, whatever. And so I remember watching that movie and I'm like, how different would we live our lives if we knew how much time we actually had? Every weekend that you're asked to work overtime, would you work overtime? You'd be like, you know what? I'm going to go out with my friends, or I'm going to spend some time with my kids, or I'm going to spend time with my wife, or I'm going to go for a hike. I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to go play basketball, play soccer, play whatever. And it's a balancing act, because it's like you can't spend too much time only doing things you want to do and not the things you have to do. But, it is a balancing act. You can't give up everything for, work and all these things that we're kind of tricked and talked into believing are the most important things, when really, most of the time with age, we look back and like, wow, like I probably worked too much, or I probably neglected certain things I enjoyed too much. I probably should have done more of the things that I enjoyed and focus on community and,
Well,
friendships and family and all. Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
right. Well, I tend to be a workaholic myself, but you're right. It took me a long time to realize that. My wife keeps on reminding me, no one in the deathbed, wishes that they had worked longer or more. You know what I'm saying? It's like, the time is gone, and hey, there you are. What have you done?
Well, I remember there was this guy, he used to go to our gym back in the day, and I remember him telling another guy, workaholic, and he went to a wake. I don't know if it was a wake or funeral, but there was this one of those picture frames. It's digital, and there's a slideshow in it.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And he's there, and he's like, this guy owned like this giant company, the guy who passed away, and there's nobody there besides like his driver and like a handful of people. And he's like,
Wow.
All these people knew him, but nobody showed up. And he's like, and
There you go.
there's his picture frame. It seemed like every picture was like work related, it was some work Christmas party or whatever.
Right. There you go. Yeah.
And then he thought to himself, and it was like the moment in his life where he kind of reevaluated things. He's like, I looked at that picture frame. He's like, and I thought to myself, what the hell would my picture frame look like? And he's like, my picture frame would look pretty much the same. It'd be a slideshow of me at work. That's the thing that's the most difficult. Like, I live in a very modest house in a very modest community. Luckily, I do have the freedom where we have a small little business where, sometimes my wife will be like, hey, if you went to go work for, this big corporation or this big company, it's like, would you make more? I'm like, yeah. But I'm like, I'd also would lose a lot. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I lose a lot of free time. And I wouldn't be there for my kids. I wouldn't be there. As like I coach them both in soccer.
Right.
I'm on the board for the Pioneers, the club that they play for. I coach them in basketball. I sign them up for futsal. I like to keep them busy. I don't just like to keep them busy. I also like to enjoy these experiences with them. When they score that big goal, they can look at me and we can share that moment together, and they know that their parents are there and that it's not just something I'm going to hear third person, second person later. It's like, I was there. I experienced it with you. And growing up, being a Portuguese immigrant myself, like, only memories of my father were him coming home from work,
Well, there
tired,
you go.
looking exhausted.
Yeah,
And I know why, because I work construction now. So
sure,
I
sure. Yeah,
sympathize.
yeah.
I sympathize with why he was always looking so exhausted, and like he just wanted to be left alone, because after a day of pouring a couple trucks of concrete in the sun and all beat up, and some at the time doing a lot of traveling to go to work and coming home late. Yeah, you kind of just did want to be left alone when you got home. You didn't have the patience.
Yeah,
You didn't
that
have.
that was me. That was me. Yeah, I just had no energy left. Yeah, verbally, mentally, physically, I was just shot, literally. It's like, leave me alone. I'm just going to watch the tube and crash out, and that's it. Here we go again the next day. I tell you, Rick, I respect you for realizing this so early in your life. A lot of people don't get to that point, what you're discussing, until it's too late. If you know what I'm saying. I
Yeah.
wish this, I wish that. In other words, regrets just come right back in, and that's another thing. In my opinion, it is a major killer. Regrets, because you dwell on that over and over. It just doesn't go away. If you can kind of like get rid of those most of the regrets, I'm sure you're gonna have some, but some of those regrets will just eat you alive, basically. Because I wish this, I wish that, I could have, I should have, I would have, I didn't. That kind of deal. But you're realizing that relatively early in your life, which is a major, major asset, in my opinion. Looking back, and hindsight being 2020, of course, you know. But I had a different upbringing, of course, than you did. So, like my road to here was scarred in a lot of different ways, and helped along also, you know. Uh, I tell you, I I'm very proud of this country. It's the best country in the world, all that stuff, and I'm very fortunate to be here. Poland right now is a free society. It's growing like crazy, and it's great, and it's very Americanized too. And so they're getting away more from the land and more into the city kind of life, if that makes any sense. Uh, but the freedom it is the key. Whereas in the past, the previous generation, literally was chained, you know, uh, to communism, basically. No way out, no hope. You get up in the morning, there's no hope. I wonder sometimes how these people get up in the morning when your day's gonna suck.
Well, I think you find enjoyment and happiness in the small things, right? The little, it's
Right,
like
right, exactly.
it's like
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
that.
They see that's it's gratitude. That's the thing. And that's another thing I realized. Kind of late in my life. To be grateful for what you have. Kind of a thing. In other words, like I mean, I have a nice house, this, that, blah, blah. Great wife, two great sons. I'm very fortunate. I tell you, as far as the families, immediate family, I'm very. I don't want to say lucky. I hate the word lucky. Lucky to me, it's like going to the slot machine and you win. Oh, I won. I prefer like playing poker or whatever. Where you do have a hand in the outcome. I mean, of course, there's some luck there, but you do have a hand in that. You're making a difference. In other words, you're not just sitting there, pushing the lever.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think a little bit of life, the things that you get and the things you're grateful for is a little bit of luck, but it's also, you can't forget that you've had some control in your own destiny. Maybe you don't have full control, and you hope that it's almost like when they say hard work and luck will cross paths eventually. It's like if you keep working
Right,
hard,
right, right,
it's
right.
like you look at all the people that are really successful, and you're like, wow, they got lucky, and then you hear their story. And I've had many on the show where you hear their story and you're like, oh wow, that wasn't luck, that was perseverance. That was not
Perseverance.
quitting.
That,
That
that's
was,
very important. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, what's that quote? A winner's just a loser who never quit, right? And it's,
Well, there you go. Yeah.
yeah, and really, it's almost like I've heard it. I'm sure you heard it from when you wanted to start, when you thought about writing a book. I heard it when I thought about wanting to start a podcast. People are like, who's going to care? Who's going to be interested? Who's going to be? Why would you do that? That's a lot of work. How do you don't know how to do that? You don't, and it's like, well, I'll figure it out, and I'll just keep going at it, and hopefully,
Well, you know what? That's exactly what I did. All the different jobs that I had, especially the businesses that I started, I just got into it, and I figured, hey, I'll learn as I go along, and that's what I did. But you know what? Being my own boss and being in control of things, whole different ball game. I mean, I was a totally different person. Instead of being like told what to do, you're out there doing it. It's a whole different attitude. It's amazing how that works. I mean, because I used to work in this factory when I was in high school, and you know, we would get a 10-minute break every 2 hours. As soon as the buzzer goes off, these people would just race to the coffee machine. Some people with a cigarette in their mouth, they're just trying to, be there first and all that stuff. Because you sat there for 10 minutes and you have to gulp the coffee, smoke a cigarette really quick, and buzzer goes off again, and boom, right back to work. You're like a machine, basically. You had no freedom and no say. Produce, produce, produce. If you don't, get the hell out of here, kind of a thing. So when I started working for myself, that's when I realized that's me. I never knew that until I started doing that. Working outside, that's another thing. I really enjoy that. I'm really bad as far as being in front of the screen. I have no patience for that whatsoever. So it's just my makeup, basically. So that's another thing. Like, you get to a point, and some people get to that point sooner than others, when you realize that what is important? Where are you going? What are you doing? Are you wasting time? What are you doing? Are you enjoying the present? You start questioning yourself, like, what? Okay, I get up in the morning, I go to work, I come home. Okay, what's up with that? What's next? So, what is the purpose? I know you got to pay the bills, this and that, but like you were saying earlier, having that balance, very difficult to attain, but you're always striving for that, I guess.
no, you're absolutely right. I mean, the thing is, and that's where, like, I think spirituality and I was raised a Catholic. I kind of rebelled against it because I rebelled against
same here. I rebelled big time.
Yeah, but as I get older, I start appreciating religion and what it brings the people's perspective on the world, and spirituality and what it brings the people's perspective on the world. Because I think if you don't live in a world of spirituality and not supernatural, but like zooming out and give yourself the opportunity to wander and ponder on the amazing miracles of the world, then we're stuck in the material world where we're just like buying things and working, and we're just stuck in this this very black and white, very simple, very emptiness, unfulfilling life, where the people who are spiritual, people who do go, like my parents, same thing, like my mom worked at a factory her whole life. My dad hated being in a building. He liked being outside. Growing up on a farm, it was more natural for him to work construction and work with his hands. And if they didn't go to church on Sunday and have a priest spark these conversations of like, why are we here? Well, what's our purpose? What, being good to people is important. The energy you put out in the world is the energy you get back, and all these things. Then it's really simple to just be a jerk and just go to work and care about getting promoted and care about getting ahead and getting more ones and zeros in the bank account, and never once zoom out and ask the questions you're asking, like, well, what's the point? What's the purpose? Why am I here? Is this all I'm here for? And so as I get older, I start appreciating those things, and I start appreciating, like, hey, spirituality, religion. These are these are opportunities to ask those questions.
Yeah, like in my case, growing up in Poland and stuff, I resented the Catholic Church mainly because I was a little kid and I was left-handed, and I was literally beat up a lot because of being left-handed. You know what I'm saying? And so the nuns and the priests will, notice you right and left-handed. There goes the ruler. You just start hitting you, or they'll put you in a corner in front of the class. You stand there like you're thinking that you're some kind of, a weirdo or something. Somebody, something's wrong with you. So I had a lot of resentment for that. But at the same time, there is a place for religion, and I think it's great to have religion. It gives you like an anchor to live by, a purpose, anchor, however you want to call it. There's a need for that. But in the old days, the Catholic Church abused people left and right. And the thing is, like, hey, listen, you got a problem, guy's the priest. He knows you don't. And he was literally, next to God kind of a thing. You don't question the priest.
Yeah, I mean, they had. I would hear stories about well, I remember where my parents grew up. There wasn't anything around except like a church and some little village houses or whatnot and farms. And that priest, like everybody knew him, everybody respected him. But I will say, like, there are some. I've heard horror stories. I heard about some priests that were hooking up with people's wives and molesting kids, and then you would hear about the priests that were the ones that when you were sick they'd come to visit you at home and they would eat with your family and they would check on everybody and make sure everybody's okay.
Yeah. So, they're almost like a part of the extended family kind of a thing, But you know what? Another thing I didn't like is the fact that priests cannot get married, nuns cannot be priests. I mean, what's up with that? That makes no sense to me. It's a stupid rule made by men, and you literally, affecting your desire and need, as a human being to procreate and have a relationship, whatever you want to call it. It makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Well, and then it sparks the problem. Like some people say, and I've heard the theory regurgitated quite a few times about the idea that a lot of gay men who were raised in these very traditional towns and villages, if they didn't want to be looked at in a weird light because they're older men who aren't married, being a priest would be a perfect way of disguising it. And then you cause that, that issue of like now you have gay men who can't publicly be themselves, so they have to hide as priests. And there's some people who believe that some of the suppression of those desires, those sexual desires, is what leads to them to do these horrific things and whatnot, and I think it's a possibility. It makes sense. There is something about it that is unnatural. This idea of like, hey,
it's totally unnatural. It just makes no sense on any level, in my opinion. Well, look at some of the other religions or whatever. The guy can get married. He's a pastor or whatever. Totally fine. And the thing is, like, in the old days, if you have a problem in the family or whatever, the priest was the guy who would come over and give you advice. He knows nothing about the family whatsoever. He has no family, yet he's the guy who knows everything. It's like laughable.
Yeah,
right?
it is kind of funny. The good thing about, and you saw it during COVID, one of the good things about churches were when people need community, the church gives people community. So
no question.
That's one of the things that you would hear people talk about. How, wait, you're not letting churches open up? And people felt like, for a lot of people, they looked forward to seeing those people at church. A couple guys that work for our family-owned company who are Guatemalan. They go to a Guatemalan church with a lot of Spanish people. They play soccer. The whole church plays soccer.
Yeah, the whole community.
They do all these things. I play basketball because in Massachusetts, for some reason, Catholic churches basically run a lot of youth basketball. And so a lot growing up playing basketball, I was always at churches. I played at St. Stan's and Chicopee. I played on Plumtree and Springfield near the Christian church. I played in all these churches. It was cool because a lot of people were members of that church and they grew up playing basketball. And then I was curious. I'm like, why are there so many basketball courts at churches? So I did a little research and come to find out it was actually a part of a plan by the Catholic Church to try to get young people more involved in the church. So they figure, hey, if our church has a basketball team, and like, so I coach basketball. I coach for the town that I live in. It's out of the Boys and Girls Club, so we're a Boys and Girls Club Ludlow team. But just about all the teams we play against are churches. And it's cool because all those people are members of that church and all those people have some connection to that church. And I'm like, yeah, it kind of builds a community, gives you a reason to go there. And it's cool because it's a different experience. Like the church that I grew up going to, Our Lady of Fatima, we didn't have any cool things at the church, everything.
Right.
So
But it is a sense of community, no question about it. It's funny because in Poland, like when I was growing up, if we didn't see you in church, you're automatically branded a commie. That was how it was. You know what I'm saying? Because in other words, everybody went to church and some didn't. That would imply you must belong to the Communist Party and all that stuff. That's why you didn't go to church. So you're kind of branded.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
funny. Obviously, now you're in college. You're trying to find your path in your life.
Right.
Do you think some of your struggles with that were some of it was a combination of still dealing with those youth experiences as a child, or do you think also the transition was what was sparking some of this, being in a new country, new world, trying to
Yeah,
find your
all of the above
all
in
the
this
above?
case, and also the loss of my mother. Because don't forget, I mean, she was the only well, and my grandmother kind of took over, and she was another saint, yeah, unbelievable. But yeah, all the above, it's like it was a major adjustment because it's like you look around, and it's like wow, you couldn't speak the language, the culture was very different, and you just have to kind of like tug along, basically, I remember like so I finished 5 grades in Poland. So they put me in the 6th grade in the United States, along with my sister, older sister, and my brother. Three of us were in the same grade, mainly because the language problem. So like when it came to like math, we were way ahead of everybody else. It was a joke. But when it came to other subjects, they took us out of class and they put us with this old semi-retired teacher, Mrs. Rich, and she would teach us English from 1st grade books. You know, that that was a very momentous experience, I tell you. And she was like really gung ho, like, hey, and we had to learn the language in one year because the following year you were in junior high school. And that's treacherous. If you don't speak the language and this and that in junior high school, the kids, will pick on you all the time and whatever. So you had to know the language at least. And then when he came to speaking, like I had the accent, and people look like, "Whoa, where the hell is this guy from?" That kind of deal. Oh, he's Polish, and of course, the Polish jokes were very prominent in those days, and other ethnic jokes. So, like so sometimes you get to a point where like you feel like just kind of putting yourself in a cocoon somewhere. You just don't want to come out, kind of a thing. Yeah, so that was a difficult experience, but in retrospect. I'm glad that all that we did. I mean, we struggled and persevered. That's the thing. Yeah.
I've heard again similar stories. Like I mentioned, with my buddy Dave Kornacki's father self-medicating with alcohol, and I've had other Polish friends of mine that have had a history of alcoholism in their family or whatnot.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think that some of that the origin story comes from the communism or in a tough upbringing of Eastern Europe at that time, or is it a cultural thing? Is it
I think it's more because of communism more than anything else, because that was the only relief from everyday pain. It was temporary, and but it's like it was like a timeout from the pain, daily pain, basically. Because during communist era, you had you are subject basically. Yeah, you couldn't do this, you can't do that, you can't say this, blah blah. That kind of deal. Yeah, so I think more of communism than anything else. It became cultural because of that too. Because a lot of people drank and became alcoholics and families fall apart and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, that makes sense because when you think about there's actually a guy who goes to our gym, Mario, who's a Native American from Canada. We talk a lot about how they're just like his family and his culture and all these people who've just been traumatized by alcoholism, right? And it's like, well, Indians aren't, Native Americans aren't naturally drawn to alcohol. It was, like you said, it became a cultural thing because you're given this land, you're
Right,
taking
right.
advantage of them, and then all these things that added up that led to now having this history of alcoholism. It's funny. I have some Western European friends who were talking about why Irish people drink so much. He's like, I know why Portuguese people are more social drinkers and why Irish people tend to drink a little bit more. And I'm like, why? He's like, because their food sucks. And I'm like, that actually kind of
Well, there's
makes.
some truth in that.
Well, that's what I was wondering because I'm thinking about it, right? And I think about like, okay, the Brits, kind of known for like, drinking a lot of, obviously during football games and whatnot and bar fights. And you think about the Irish and then you think some of it probably does have to do with the toughness of like some of the history in those countries. Obviously you had in Ireland the Troubles, and you think Eastern Europe, same thing. Communism in Poland, communism in
Sure,
much of
sure.
Eastern Europe. But I wonder if some of it does also have to, like you could simplify, like maybe the food does have something because you think of like Western Europe, Portuguese people. Like I don't drink a lot, but I drink often. I drink every night. When I eat after this
Yeah,
podcast,
yeah. How about a beer and a glass of wine? That's my thing.
yeah, I'm the same way. I
Yeah,
have a
that's
glass
my
of wine.
nightly, whatever, but
Yeah, same here.
drink
And
or
I have
whatever you
it
want to call
I
it.
have it with food.
Yeah,
So it becomes this thing that you combine with food and eating. Speaking of like community and finding these enjoyments in life, like I'm a big believer that since like the beginning of time, like you were saying, like you could have a hard factory job or even before that, you're a hunter gatherer and you're just struggling all day. Your pleasure at the end of the day was just like sitting down and finally just eating and relaxing. And I feel like that's so deep rooted in our DNA that I
yeah.
still like for me like there's nothing better and that's why I'm so adamant about like and again like we take the things we like from our parents and we filter out the things we don't like. One of the things I did like and I didn't really appreciate at the time, but I could get F's on the report card, I could get in trouble, I could do whatever, but nothing would piss off my parents more than my mother making this dinner and it's time to eat and
Oh, yeah.
they have to wait for me because I'm late to the
Yeah,
dinner
yeah,
table.
yeah,
And
yeah. That same in Poland. I mean, family was dinner time. You better be there. That was but one thing about Portugal, like culturally, I suppose, wine. They drink a lot of wine, but they make wine, right? So I mean, it becomes a cultural thing. Poland, I mean, they made vodka.
yeah, what is it, spiritus?
Spiritus. Well, spiritus is like, I'll give you a shot. When you come over our house there, what I do is every time a new person comes to our house, right, a male, right, the female has a choice, but the male, he has to share a shot of spiritus with me. Now, this stuff here, man, you take one shot, you don't want to have any other shots, period. It's 192 proof.
Yeah, I had my good friends
Yeah,
Marcin
think about that.
their brothers Marcin and Emil, rest in peace. Their father, who also passed away. I remember I loved their father because their father reminded me of my father. He was at his
Yeah,
happiest when he was around company
yeah.
and drinking, right? And my father's the same way. Like nothing makes him happier than having people over the house that he can eat and drink with and laugh and whatever. It's funny because this reminds me of a story I heard not too long ago. I wonder how much of it do you think is true? Like somebody was talking about traveling to Eastern Europe, and I don't remember which country it was. It might have been Poland, might have been Russia, who knows? But they
Yeah,
were in
yeah.
Eastern Europe, and they were talking about how during the day when people are doing their chores and working or whatever, everybody seems kind of cold, a little like not antisocial, but kind of like to themselves, not really happy vibes, right? But and then at the end of the night when they are eating and drinking, he's like all of a sudden the
Oh, yeah,
smiles come out,
yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
so I wonder how much of the drinking comes from that. Like you live in a tough environment where especially Eastern Europe, where not a whole lot of vitamin D, right?
Sure.
There's
Yeah.
not beaches everywhere. There's not beautiful climate all the time. So you have to deal with some struggles and you have to deal with some stuff that I think toughens you up quite a bit. But maybe that end of the night you finally have that drink and it's like, wow, now I can kind of it helps bring a little bit of happiness in a place
Yeah,
where
it does.
there's not a
I
lot of
view this
happiness.
as one of the simple pleasures of life. And I'm not talking, sitting there. I used to know this guy, right? He would drink a 30 pack every single night after work. You know, He'd work on the way home. He'd stop at a package store, 30 pack of beer, right? And he would sit outside in the summertime drinking his beer and all that stuff. Eventually, he would pass out, and his dog would come over and lick, lick his face and this and that. The next night, here we go again. So, I mean, this guy was totally gone. But what I'm saying is a complimentary drink in the evening after a hard day's work, simple pleasures of life. It's like taking a nice long shower, kind of a thing. Simple pleasure of life, and you got to appreciate that.
Well, that's a thing. It's like, are you drinking because you're self-medicating, or are you drinking
Well,
because
there you
you're
go. I mean, yeah, I drink Sam Adams because I enjoy it. But I'm not going to drink 5 or 6 beers. I can't. Yeah, I'm not a drinker per se, but I enjoy glass of wine and a beer in the evening. That's my thing. You know, two of my brothers became alcoholics, and that was their way of dealing with all the past, nightmares or whatever you want to call it. In my case, it was working, a workaholic. They're alcoholics. I was a workaholic. So there you go.
yeah.
In other words, like we tried to deal with those demons in our own way. I mean, there was no family structure to give you advice or whatever. You kind of did it on your own. And then, if you overdo it, you become lost, basically. You just waste your life away, kind of a thing.
Done quite a bit of shows on depression and anxiety. There's one called, what's his name, Johan Hari, who did a book about the real causes of depression, and talks about the importance of community, simple things like exercise, and all these things that can, you can help deal with anxiety, depression, some inner demons, finding fulfillment and happiness in like different places and whatnot. I forget what his name is. He wrote the book Tribe. He ended up doing a documentary on like these military people. I don't know if they're Marines or whatnot. They're in Afghanistan. It was like one of the most dangerous places in Afghanistan. And he's interviewing them, and they're like, I can't wait to get home to my family. I can't wait to, get out of this place. Any day could be my last here. And then he revisits them like, a year later. They're back into the normal world where they're working a 9 to 5 and whatnot. And they're all depressed. They're all unhappy.
Yeah.
And he's trying to figure out, he's like, listen, you just came from like one of the most dangerous spots on the planet.
Right.
And you live in a safe environment now. And like, what's going on? And after interviewing them and a bunch of them, he realized that like that gave them purpose, being in the military, being with a brotherhood where like what they were doing, they felt like had a meaning and had, gave them a purpose to wake up in the morning. And, if you don't have that, then they felt empty. And, I think that's what many of us are looking for. We're looking for that purpose, that meaning. And you see it, right, with like people who have addictive personalities. They stop drinking, but and then they're chain smokers and they drink coffee 100 times a day, right? And I think we all have that. And it's weird because like my relationship with alcohol was always different than some of the other people, like some of the Eastern European friends of mine or whatnot, because I've never saw alcohol as a bad thing. Like for me, like in my household or in holidays or whatever, it was always just a social lubricant. It was like,
Right.
people start drinking, and all of a sudden everybody's a little funnier, and everybody's a little better looking, and everybody's a little happier, and everybody's
It's definitely. But you know what? Looking for that happy medium is so elusive. Looking back and in my life and all that stuff. Because like you're like doing things that I don't know. You have no. Sometimes you have no purpose, but you do it anyway because you have to pay the bills or whatever. You just kind of get stuck in a rut almost, and it gets to a point where you feel like you have no way out. But there is a way out. It's all right here. But it takes a long time for this to change to the other side, as I found out. But yeah, I tell you, your mind is very malleable. I'm talking about firsthand. Because right now, when I go to the gym, I do it for this more than anything else. When I do my timeout in heaven, I do it for this. And I tell you, I have a pad next to me because some of the ideas that come to my mind for anything come during that time when I do my free flow exercise. I'm talking about? It's like a 10-minute. You just sit there and you just let your thoughts go, but only on positive things. If negative thought comes in, you got to kick it in the ass. See you later. I know it's easy to say, but very difficult to do. But you get to that point where you become neutral, so to speak, in the present. You hear these background sound, the birds and this and that. In other words, you're in the present. I mean, how many times did I come home from work in the past? The furnace is running, right? I would never hear that. When I do this timeout, it's very obvious, and that sound is almost it's pleasant because it's been there with you all the time. You just never recognize that because you're never in the present. You're always somewhere else. Bouncing around. Your mind's all over the place. To find that present is extremely difficult, but it's very possible.
Well, one of my favorite quotes is, if you change what you look at changes. Or if you change if you change the way you look at something, what you look at changes. And it's so true, right? It's like when I wake up in the morning, or when you wake up in the morning and you're sore from work and maybe going to the gym or whatever, you can either say, hey, you know what? Like, I need a day off. Like, don't force it or whatever. Or you can say, hey, stop making excuses and go. You're going to feel better. Even if you get a shitty workout, you're going to feel better. So it's like,
you literally have to talk to yourself.
Yeah. Oh, and that's what I mean, we all do it. We all,
yeah. I mean, many times, like, I feel like crap, and I go, listen, you're going to feel better when you leave. So get your ass in there. So it's almost like the angel and the devil. You're stuck in the middle, like, which way should I go? Well, the angel's got to win, because otherwise you're screwed, right?
Well, and having that leisure time, like you said, is so important. Like, I remember talking to Dr. Jessica Rose. I was telling her, like, how even employers are talking about how giving, because, historically, in the era that we grew up in, my dad grew up in, you grew up in, like, downtime didn't exist. Like, if you weren't constantly busy, you were costing me money. Like, you cannot be still. You have to look busy, whatever. And now what employers are finding is that some of the best ideas come when you have downtime, when you have some leisure time, right? And
exactly.
And if you think about it, like when I'm at the gym between sets, when I'm going for a walk, when I'm in the car, when I'm in the shower, that's when you're
exactly right. And when I get to that point in doing my exercise, I get to a point where, you know what, the ideas just flow. It's amazing. But you got to be in that frame of mind, and it takes a very difficult time and long time to get there. In my case, anyway, because of my situation. But once you get there, you want to go there every single day. And you know what? When you finish with the exercise, you're more empathetic to people. Because you're relaxed. You're more human, so to speak. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I always say when I go to play basketball or soccer, I'm like, I want to leave so tired that I'm too exhausted to be mad about anything, and that's really when I'm at my best. I come home, the kids are driving my wife crazy, and I'll just be like, hey, everybody, just calm down, and she's like, how are you so calm? I'm like, because I don't have any energy left to spend, being angry. And that's one thing you learn too, is like, wow, it takes a lot less energy to be happy and in a good mood and calm than it does to be angry. And it's funny that, like, how different people have similar experiences and have different outcomes, because because you can have a drink from time to time and you can still enjoy right. it, even with the trauma that you grew up with, and maybe your siblings struggle with that. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that, like, your father maybe abusing alcohol didn't negatively affect your relationship with alcohol?
Yeah, I know, because you would think I'll be predisposed to that. And I just never saw the need for that. It's a personal thing. It has a lot to do with your personality too, I think, your makeup and your attitude towards things. And, the easy way out is to get wasted. That's a cowardly way out, in my opinion. You know what I'm saying? To kind of try not to go there. I mean, it's difficult to kind of restrain yourself and enjoy it for the pleasure of the drink, not because you have to get wasted. But so it's a personality thing, I think, and it's amazing because some people like one of my brothers, my youngest, he told me he drank a lot and he smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day. One time he realized, you know what, I got to quit. He quit cold turkey, just like that. How does that happen? And so, like, I smoked cigarettes when I was in the senior high school, and then freshman in college for 2 years. I tried quitting smoking. It was one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life. Yet there's my brother. Boom, gone. Go figure that one.
Well, you ever hear of the Rat Park experiment? I probably have talked to you about it. I'm sure because I've talked a lot about it. But
Yeah,
it's a very interesting experiment about the idea that like they had these rats in a cage, and one of the waters had cocaine, one of them didn't.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
They kept coming back to the cocaine. Eventually, it died, and then these Canadian scientists or psychologists are like, "Hey, we have to consider that the cage is a part of the experiment and affecting the outcome. So let's recreate a rat park and a place where it has its natural habitat, it can run around or whatever, and see what happens." And then the rat didn't kill itself by drinking all the cocaine. So it's like what they learned was that like, oh, okay, what was causing it to come back to the cocaine wasn't the fact that cocaine was addictive, but it was because it was unhappy in the cage, and that cocaine gave it a little bit of happiness, so it kept coming back. And if it had happiness somewhere else, if you give it its natural habitat where it can run and play and do other things, then
right, right.
it doesn't need a cocaine. So what
Yeah,
they highlight is that maybe, because a lot of times in America we talk about addiction, and I say America, but probably everywhere they talk about addiction, and they talk about like you can quantify how addictive alcohol is, or quantify how addictive, this substance is more addictive than that, and that substance, and it's like I don't think it's that simple, and I'm not sure it's a accurate explanation of why somebody is addicted to something, because if it was as easy as saying, hey, this substance is more addictive than that substance, then that means that if take 50 people, we should all equally be as addictive to that
well,
addictive substance.
exactly right. That's never the case.
No,
Because
it's
everybody's
not.
an individual, yeah, right. They have the makeup's different. Everybody's different, and well, it's like relating this to people in Poland, like my father-in-law and stuff. You had no way out. You were in a cage, basically. So alcohol was the only release from the cage, temporary, but it was a release from the cage.
So
Yeah.
did you always have a good relationship with alcohol, or was it after you learned to find this inner peace and
No, I was never a heavy drinker. I mean, when I go out, like I write in a book about the Scarecrow Convention. Did you read that part?
I believe I skimmed it, yes.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. You got to read that. But anyhow, for like 17 years now, myself, my 2 sons, uh, two nephews, and my brother-in-law, we go to see Red Sox games in different cities every year. We've been doing it for 17 years. The stories it's one of the best times you can ever think of. And we talk about it all the time. And when I get together with my sons and all that stuff, it's hilarious. The things that happen there. It's so it's getting to a point right now where the game itself is secondary. Spending time with your sons and your relatives and all that stuff, what a blast! What a blast! And it's just an escape from everything. Totally. See you later. And having a great time. So, what I'm saying is people need that. They need that escape, that time out in heaven, whatever you want to call it. There's a need for that. And if you don't get that, you're not gonna be okay. I mean, I tell you, anxiety, depression, who knows what. You're not gonna be okay at all. But you got to find that. And that's difficult to do. To find that what makes you happy, quote unquote. Like you were saying, it's not money, as we know, because it's happy temporarily, and then after that, what's next? It's almost like human nature. I think it's human nature where you're at a certain point, right? Well, you want to go beyond that. Once you reach that, well, you want to go beyond that. It's almost like an innate need that humans have. I don't know.
Yeah, but that's why I think there's I would say this all the time, because working construction and being around these like go-getters who are people who are always like trying to get more money, trying to find ways to make more money, try to get bigger contracts, all this stuff. Sometimes I would be around those people and I'm like, wow, they are way more motivated than I am. Maybe something's wrong with me. Maybe I could be in like a better financial situation if I was just as motivated as they are. Growing up, my mother, like coming from like a poor village, like, like you came from, they saved everything. Like if you're not making a lot of money, then saving money is the same as making money, right? It's the same thing, because it's like you're not making a lot, but if you're saving a lot, then, that's better than making a lot and spending a lot. It's to them, they would save everything. But the thing is, the only thing my mother would ever talk about would be saving money. So it's like, hey, I'm going to go play basketball. What if you get hurt and then you can't work, and then who's going to pay your bills? Like everything revolved around like saving. So, and then as an adult, I'm like, you know what? I'm like every stress at home, every conversation with my father, everything always revolved around money, and it always seemed like a negative topic, right? So, once I became an adult, I'm like, I don't want to think about it. I want to spend as little time thinking about it. I'm like, let me just make enough to get by. I don't want to stress about it. To me, I always had this relationship with money similar to maybe some people would have with alcohol if they had alcoholism in their life. Like they looked at alcohol as like, hey, all this trauma and all this negativity from my upbringing involved alcohol. And it's like, with me, it was like every fight at home, every stress was like, how are we going to pay the bills? How, we got to save money. Like, don't do anything if it requires spending money. Only do things that making money was like always what your focus should be. And to me, I'm like, what an empty life. What it's okay to do things just for you, to be happy, to enjoy life.
Yeah, I agree, but at the same time, there's a need for money, mainly because you got to pay the bills and this and that, and it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's you don't want to get in a cycle where you're just chasing money and your life becomes almost meaningless, that kind of deal. But look how many divorces as a result of money fights, right? I mean, so that is an important factor. You just got to keep it in the right place, I suppose, Well, and the biggest problem we have, it's not making the money, it's spending the money on frivolous crap, useless crap. Well, what's the next shiny thing? I got a new Apple over here, blah, 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 this and that. Hey, you can do this, then, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's great. 10 minutes later, no big deal. Where's the happiness?
Well, planned obsolescence. These things are
yeah, right, exactly.
They're designed to fail. So then you keep buying them, and then you become a slave to like just constantly buying these material things. And it, like you said, it doesn't bring you happiness. One of my favorite bands growing up, I had the singer on not too long ago, Jamie Josta, who's actually from Connecticut, but they had this album, this band Hatebreed had this album called Satisfaction is a Death of Desire. And I remember being a kid and reading that title, and I'm like, Satisfaction is a Death of Desire. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, that's like profound, but simple at the same time. I'm like, it really is that simple. And I'm like, satisfaction is a death of desire. I'm like, I really, really want something. Once I'm satisfied, the desire is gone and I have to move on to the next thing. So I'm like, well, where could I find satisfaction where it doesn't die, right? And it's like, it's experiences, it's community, it's friendships, it's not material things. It's like when they say the journey is more important than the destination, because the journey is what you enjoy. Once you're there, satisfaction is death of desire. I've made it there. Now I move on to the next thing, right? It's like
the next journey, whatever you want to call it. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So it is super important to kind of put those things in perspective, and everything is perspective. Like working construction, I think I've told this story on the podcast a few times, but like we had this contract where it was like a City of Springfield contract where it was construction funds for purposely places that were like the average income was like less than 30 grand or like 20 grand or whatever it was, right? Yeah. And so it was like really poor areas of Springfield. We're working there, right? And you see like real life crackheads. You see houses that are boarded up. You see people with raggedy clothes. You see people who look like they're messed up on drugs. You feel unsafe working in these communities, and you go home and you feel so grateful to be in a place where like, hey, if I forget to lock my door, I'm not worried about my house being robbed that much. If my kids are playing outside, I'm not worried about my kids being offered drugs. Like you're just grateful because I was in a place that people had less than me. So I was like grateful for what I did have. And then that same year, my wife has family that lives in Boca, right? And we go there, and they're telling me these stories about how like their kids feel like they're poor because everybody in Boca has tons of money, and they just they own a little tavern and don't have tons of money, and they're are all their friends are like come from families where their families are attorneys or this or real estate or whatever, and they all make all so they feel poor, and I'm like. And then, my wife wanted to show me some of the like ritzy parts of Boca where like, oh, this celebrity lives here. And then, so it's like, and then I start feeling poor. I'm like, you're there. You see like some 17-year-old in a brand new Range Rover, and you see like a Maybach, and you see the Rolls Royce, and you see a Bentley, and you're like, wow, man, I feel like I haven't accomplished anything in my life. I feel like a loser, And then I'm like, wow, like earlier this year, I was working that poor part of Springfield, and I felt grateful, and now I'm here, and I feel poor. And it's like you realize, like, oh, in reality, nothing's changed. The only thing that's changed is my perspective.
The thing is, like, you're judging yourself, against other people instead of you judging yourself with yourself, so to speak. If that makes any sense. In other words, being content where you are.
And that's where content is a word out.
Content is happiness, I think.
Yeah, I completely
peace of mind,
agree.
content is happiness. Having that peace of mind where you enjoy life for now. It's I don't know how to explain it, but
what I would tell people, I'm like, instead of I'm like, spend more time being grateful for what you do have and less time wanting things you don't have. That quote, like, your worst day is somebody else's best day, right? Your worst day could be, I got in a little fender bender with my car, and like, oh my God, what a horrendous day. I got in a car accident. Yeah. And then somebody else is somewhere where they have to walk miles to get clean water, and it's like,
well, yeah. Well, there you go. I mean, like, I remember when I was in Poland back in '79, it was still communist. We went to Auschwitz. We went to city of Krakow. Auschwitz is like next door, literally. And some of the horror stories that you saw, and the guy told you, it's like you think you got it bad. I mean, for example, they had the main camp, and there was another camp being built specifically for women and children. And they would do experiments on these people, this and that, blah blah. Once they were totally used up and useless, they would force them to dig their own graves. They have to line up in front of the grave. There'll be 3 trucks coming along. The first truck would have flamethrowers, right? Next truck, no, not flamethrowers. Sorry, gasoline. Second truck, very routinely, would come over with flamethrowers, and then the third truck, it was literally to bury the people. Backhoes or whatever. It was. It's impressive how systematic the Germans were. They're very efficient. But you hear this and you think you got a bad life. Look what happened to those people. They were literally stripped of their own dignity, wasted away, and look, it gives you a whole different perspective on life.
So how we keep talking about the issues of not being grateful, not being content. How did you find the ability to be grateful and be content? Because it sounds like you were struggling to find inner peace for quite a bit of portion of your life. How did you reach that?
Trial and error, basically. And I think first of all, sports was definitely a major plus, because when I was playing sports, soccer or whatever, I was a good player. I mean, I was like, I felt good. People say, "Oh, you did a great job. You scored a goal, whatever." You felt important. You're part of the team and all that stuff. And so that I think sports was one of the key factors. In that case. And after that, I started working out in the gym back in the '80s. There was a gym in Springfield called Big Daddy's. I don't know if you ever heard of that. But anyway, so I used to work out there, and that's when I got hooked on working out. And I just started doing it from 1980, whatever, and I still do it. It's a lifestyle. It becomes part of you, and it's good for your body, good for your mind. It's a break from everyday crap. You know, you enter a different world, basically.
And it's another community.
Another community too. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. A community of like kind. You know, you might have different views, different that, blah, blah, but we're there for the same reason in the end.
Yeah,
You know?
and it's motivating. I mean, I remember during COVID working out at home. My parents still had a lot of my old dumbbells and stuff like that when I lived at home, so I would go work out at their house, and I wasn't quite as motivated. And when I would go to the gym, and one, if I'm driving there and I'm taking the commute there, I might as well get something done. And two, no matter how tired I felt or whatever, I'd get there and there'd be somebody who's working their ass off, and I'm like, I should work my ass off. They look like they're pushing harder than me. They look like they're trying harder than me. I'm like, why? Let me try a little harder. Maybe I'm being lazy, And so it's like that, if you believe in energy, and I do, like that energy of like everybody kind of just like having these goals. And then the other thing too is like everybody in the gym's kind of in a good mood because that's your getaway from all the stresses. And that's
Exactly.
also,
Yeah.
it's also one of
You
your
know,
best therapies for all the stresses.
yeah. Well, let me ask you this, Ricky. Yeah, I don't want to pry personally, but do you regard yourself as being content in general?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm actually sometimes worried that I'm too content. That's
Well, yeah. Well, the thing is, you shouldn't be. I know it's difficult to be judging yourself against other people. Yeah, I mean, yeah, but it's human nature, though. You can't escape that, right? Oh, that's how it is,
yeah,
right?
I think about it all the time. Like if I never had a newer car, a bigger house, nicer things,
By
but
choice, by choice.
yeah, if I never had those things, but I'm like, I'm okay with this phone. I'm okay with this computer. I'm like, as long as my family's healthy, my kids are happy, I'll be happy. I don't need any of the other stuff. I don't desire any of it. I don't like, to me, it's like really my enjoyment. I look forward to doing these podcasts and I think that like, to me, it feels good just putting it out to the world and feeling like, hey, I'm helping put something positive in the world. Like I've helped create something, and I say help create something because the listeners who tune in, I think a big part of it, the people who are willing to come on and tell their stories and share their life wisdom and perspectives are a part of it. But like I'm a part of like putting something that I think is important and can be something positive in other people's lives. I'm like I'm doing something, and a big part of why I started my podcast was similar to like probably what motivated you to write the book was like I wanted to do something more. I felt unfulfilled. I grew up playing music, and to me that was my therapy. That and sports and exercise, and then I thought like sports and exercise would be enough when the band kind of broke up and I stopped doing music, and then it just wasn't. I still felt like something was missing, and I was kind of in, I felt like a hamster on a wheel where I was just going to work and whatever. And then I got into listening to podcasts, and I was doing a lot of commuting, and I'm like, wow, I listen to these podcasts and it's fun. I'm like, because I always enjoyed conversation. I always enjoyed meeting people. I remember, the very first episode I did with Dave Kornacki, and it was 2013. To some people, especially people older than myself, he didn't understand like the appeal of podcasts. And I would try to explain to him, I'm like, listen, when you and I are sitting around having a drink, and we're at the bar or we're at one of each other's houses around the dinner table, and we're chatting all night, next thing you know, it's like, whoa, it's like midnight, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
right. Where did
was,
time go?
yeah, that was enjoyable. I'm like, all we're doing is archiving that. We're recording it and we're sharing it with the world. So I'm like, so the same way that conversation is enjoyable, why wouldn't it be enjoyable for people to be a spectator into that conversation, or feel like they're a part of it because they're listening to it? So to me, it made perfect sense. I'm like, since the beginning of time, we've enjoyed debating and sharing and
Right.
and
And you know what? The art of conversation has been missing lately, right? I mean,
and it's
you
probably
have
only
the
going to
art
get
of
worse.
conversation big time. But what I'm saying, generally speaking, people out there that they cannot express themselves verbally. They'll grunt. I mean, they're always like blah, 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 on the phone or whatever. That kind of deal. We don't have that you know ability as we did in the past. Conversation was huge in the past, right? You get the meal, you get the drink there, and conversation. Those are free.
You're right,
And that's missing a lot of respects.
And I also think that's probably why the increase of anxiety and depression. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
always say,
I
I'm
agree.
like,
I agree. Yeah,
on Monday's Union of the Unwanted, I was saying how, and I've said on the show, where like the people who have some of the people who have the most friends on Facebook or the most followers and communities online are some of the loneliest people. They're not real, right? They're
no
not real.
question about
They're
it.
not
Yeah.
real
Yeah, I
interactions.
make a point of that in the book there. You might sit in front of a computer and you got 2,000 friends. You press another button, now you got 2,001 friends. I prefer one good friend, a real person, rather than this crap. I mean, what does that mean? Your friends. Oh, I got 1,000 friends, 2,000 friends. Oh, what the hell does that mean?
Well, the thing is too is that sometimes you don't even know who these people are. You never really meet them,
Oh, yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah,
and
yeah,
the thing
yeah,
is
yeah.
that's what gives me hope for humanity is the fact that I don't think no matter how good AI gets and technology gets, there's something about human interaction. And I think I've talked to you about, and I've talked probably too much about it. The
Yeah.
listeners are probably sick of me talking about it, but ESP and Rupert Sheldrake and morphic resonance and
Yeah.
telepathic evidence now that like maybe there is some way of like feeling other people, maybe
Right, right. It's
transmitting.
almost like the fourth sense or the fifth sense, whatever
Yeah,
you want to call
yeah,
it,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
And
And I
maybe
believe people have those abilities. They're just not explored. Yeah, yeah, right. I mean,
well, and
it's
or maybe we lose it. So
yeah,
I had the professor of psychology in from Notre Dame on the podcast years ago. She's been on quite a few times, and I remember I had her on because she studied a lot of youth development and trauma and a lot of things that had to do with parenting and kids. And at the time, I was becoming a new parent, so I wanted to learn more about it. And something she talked about that now is kind of connecting some dots for me is this idea of when you're a child, right? And you're a newborn and you can't verbally communicate, what you have to depend on is other things, right? So you pick up
right,
on
right,
social
right. Your other senses
yes,
pick up the
exactly. So
slack, so to speak. Yeah,
exactly. So what she was saying was
yeah.
that actually when you're little, you actually have better senses of social cues and you pick up on negative energy, positive energy. So and she was she made the point in her books and in her studies to explain to parents that like, hey, you might think that kid doesn't know that you're angry or there's friction within the household, but even though that child doesn't speak yet, it can pick up on the friction and negative energy.
Oh, no question about it.
And
Yeah, yeah. The negative energy. Yeah, yeah. It's innate. I think right from when you're a little child. And you're right. I think that little kids pick up on that a lot easier because they're not
they can't depend on verbal
exposed to
skills.
all this other crap. They're simple-minded. They pick up on that. They're in the present.
Yeah, and what she says is that what happens is that as time goes by and as you develop verbal skills, right, you depend on those other things less, and then you almost lose them to some extent. Where like
Right, 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 right,
or
right.
they weaken. So this brings it back to the other thing, like you talked about. Maybe we have this sense, but maybe we've lost it, or we don't have. And then you look at it, I can't. Why I'm such an immigrant sometimes. The telepathic tapes or telepathy
Oh, yeah,
tapes
right, right. Yeah, yeah.
that when they have these nonverbal autistic kids
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah,
non-speak
yeah. I've heard
and
that a podcast. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and
That is mind blowing.
yeah, so it kind of makes sense when you think about it. So it's
Yeah,
like, okay, so if I don't have this skill to verbalize what I'm thinking or feeling, I have to depend on other abilities. And it's the
right.
same way that a blind person's hearing becomes better, or they pay attention to details more, or a person who doesn't have hearing can notice little details visually because whatever ability you have to figure things out, that you're going to put all your effort and energy into it. And if you don't have the verbal ability, that means that maybe you're going to focus and use these other abilities.
Right,
So
right, right,
like, I
right.
wonder if like us establishing vocabulary and conversation and verbally being able to communicate, what's happened is that now we've neglected or have lost our
Right.
knowledge on how to tap into these other abilities because we don't need them anymore, right? And maybe when we're hunter
Yeah,
gatherers,
exactly. It's funny how the mind's so malleable. You'll switch gears on that stuff and concentrate on this rather than that, and then go back to this. It's amazing.
well,
It
when you
really
think
is.
about it, right, we watch birds in the sky all the time move together, right? They move together, like they're not talking, they're not putting on their blinker. How are they moving
Yeah,
together? How are they sharing that information that all going to take a left now, or we're all going to, or like a school of fish, right? Like
yeah.
how it
Oh
makes
yeah, that's a great example. School of Fish. I mean, birds flying. It's like there's no. It's almost like it's not really organized, but it's very organized. If that makes any sense. In other words, there's no leader per se, but they go in the same direction, like in unison,
They're sharing,
right? As
they're
one.
connected. Yeah, we're all connected, right? In some way or another.
Yeah.
And that's the part that's fascinating. And it's wild because it really, to me, it's like what we're discovering or maybe rediscovering is some explanation on the some of the humanity's secrets and some of the maybe even uncovering like some of the origin story of humanity, and these things are just super fascinating. And yeah, it's wild. And it's funny you talk about like you call when you're in that place where you find peace, like heaven. These in that documentary or that podcast, they talk about how they have that place called the Hill. Have you heard about this? Where these nonverbal, non-speaking autistic kids all meet in this place. It's mental, maybe. Oh, I don't
Yeah.
know if it's internal, if it's external, but they all meet in this place they call the Hill, and they have conversations and they share ideas and they can whatever. And it's like it sounds like it's in their head, but they'll have people from other places who are meeting in this place called the Hill, and they're sharing ideas, so they'll know things about each other without ever meeting each other. And
That's unbelievable.
isn't it? It's
Yeah, that is like wow. That is mind blowing. But you know what I think. I think our unconscious mind is the director of us, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, our conscious mind, like you're doing this, you're doing that, blah blah. But whatever you tuck away in the unconscious, that's the big one. If you can access that, and in my opinion, when I get to that point where I'm totally like free and I literally access that other side, I almost become like separate from my body and mind, if that makes any sense. It's difficult to explain. You got to experience that and go, okay, I know exactly what you mean. It's one of those deals.
well, you hear people talk about out of body experiences,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
kind of the same thing. Like,
yeah.
what do we mean when we say? Well, even like it's funny because we talked about going to a wake or a funeral. There's something even as a kid that I would pick up on is like when I would go. I remember the first time I went to a wake, and for some reason, all these people were crying. And I was there and I'm like, it didn't affect me the same way because I would look at the body and I'm like, oh, that's not the person. Like I felt like something was missing, right? Like it's almost like my brain understood the soul has left, and this is
Right.
just like the person that I love or I know isn't really here. This is just some like material physical
It's just a physical body. Yeah,
physical
the
body. But
spirit or whatever is gone.
yeah, and like
Yeah,
so it
yeah.
always looked lifeless and soulless, and it's like, what is it about a person who's alive that has this life that you can't really explain it, but like there's life in a person, right? It's almost like when a woman's pregnant and they say that they have this
Yeah.
beautiful life to them, like they have this glow to them,
This
and it's
globe out of it,
yeah,
exactly.
and
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then you look at like you go to a wake or a funeral, and I look at it and I'm like, it almost looks fake, like it doesn't seem like the person that. And I'm like, is it just a physical thing that I'm experiencing, or is it that like this soul has left, and that's why I don't feel connection to this body,
Right,
right?
right. I know exactly what you mean. When I go to a funeral, like I look at the person and there is no soul. I mean, right? I mean, you're looking at a physical whatever. But there's no. In other words, it's disconnected from you.
It's almost like looking at
There's you and there's the body, and that's it.
it's like looking at a chair or a
Yeah, yeah,
TV, or
exactly.
it's
It's
just
some
a.
innate object, so to speak. You recognize them, but there you are. I mean, there's no connection there. There's the
Now,
spirit is gone, I guess, or whatever.
no. So for people listening who obviously have heard a lot about your story about some of the traumas and some of the amazing journey, and then you've discovered this like internal peace. How old were you when you started doing this? How has it affected your life as like a parent, as a husband, as a friend, as a all these things, as a business owner? Have you taught people these methods? How has your whole worldview and your whole world experience changed?
Well, it's a self discovery, basically. In other words, uh, you try this, you try that, this doesn't work, and try this. And I kind of fell into this because of my demons, basically. And I didn't want to take any more drugs. And that's how I dealt with it. I figured, hey, listen, I want to kind of devote time to myself.
And you
You know?
you did try some drugs, right? Therapy, any of that stuff
Oh
work?
yeah, I've done that drug, like all these prescription drugs over the years, big time, right from the '70s on. Because I didn't know what the hell was wrong with me. I had all these tests done, this and that. Then these people have no clue, so they go, okay, you're this. Another guy goes, no, you're that. Okay, you take this over here, take this for that. It'd be being bounced around from one person to another, and they don't care, and they have no clue. They just give you a prescription and see you later, kind of a thing.
Yeah, there's a
There's no
great.
like kind of meaningful therapy or talk or whatever. It's just like, hey, you take this, you'll feel better, kind of a thing. But it took me a long time to get to this point. But I tell you, being there, I can't explain it. I'll just say it's wonderful bliss.
There's a great documentary I'll send to you. It's called Making a Killing that goes through the whole history of like these pharmaceutical drugs and how they basically just call the chemical imbalance. They get you on this pill and
Oh
that pill,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
become a guinea pig. And I mean, what they don't tell you is that exercise has been proven to help anxiety and depression more statistically than any prescription drug.
No question.
And really, that's where you
Totally
should
agree with that.
start. You should start with some of these natural ways of like go for a walk. Maybe start playing a sport so you make some friends and build a community. Start there, and then worst case scenario, and I would, I'm not a doctor, but I would never, I would say that most of this stuff would work. You would never need to take a pill. But worst case scenario, if everything else fails, which I have a hard time believing it would, then maybe go to a doctor and see if they have a pill or something
There
that.
is a place for that, right? There is a place for medication, all that stuff, but it's grossly being abused, as you know, to a point where we're just becoming robots. Like, I mean, I was a robot for a long time. My wife would say, "Hey, listen, the house is burning down." I go, "Okay, let's call up the fire department." I wouldn't panic. Either way, I was like a neutral robot, like in the middle somewhere. It's like, oh, here we go. It had no personality, no ups and downs. It was like this.
Well, that's the thing. They suppress all emotions. But if you suppress all.
Exactly. All that
Yeah.
stuff has been totally suppressed. You don't experience, the real world, so to speak, because you're on that daze. You're on the daze almost.
And can't you make the argument that ups and downs are what makes life worth living, right?
Ups and downs is part of life. Part of life, man. It's how you handle those ups and downs, right?
And you
That's
enjoy the
it.
good because you've been through the bad.
Right, right. But you know what? The good feels so much better when you went through the bed. If that makes any sense, because you
Yeah.
have a point of reference. You know what I'm saying? And a
Well,
lot of
and you
these people, like you were
appreciate it.
talking about, this young kid there driving around in fancy car and stuff at 17. He hasn't experienced the bad. Is he going to be able to function on his own down a road or whatever? Yeah. I mean, okay, he's got the money. Okay, but how about everything else? He's going to be, kind of void of that.
There's a guest that Rogan had on, very wealthy, and he talked about how like when he was like 16, he wanted a Mustang GT or a Camaro Z28 or whatever it was, and he's like, and he was trying to make the point that he's like, hitting 10 on the happiness and fulfillment scale gets harder and harder. So he's like, when I was 16, I always wanted a Camaro or whatever it was. He's like, I
Right,
got
right.
that thing. He's like, I hit 10, right? I was the happiest guy on earth. I could not believe I owned this thing. And he's like, then I started making, money. And he's like, and then, like a Mercedes helped me hit 10, right? And then he's like, from a Mercedes, it went from like, okay, now I needed a Ferrari to hit 10, right? And now I get the Ferrari.
Never
Now
ends.
I need a Bugatti.
Right,
Boom.
right.
And now I'm at the Bugatti and I'm like, wait, there's nothing more. How do I hit 10? And he's like, now
Right,
you're
right.
stuck having to find happiness in other places because hitting 10 isn't as easy anymore. You can't keep, using those material things. And when I have a cheat day, I enjoy the meal because I ate good the whole week. So then I'm like, okay, you know what? I earned this. I suffered a little bit, or
Right, 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 right,
or when
right,
I
right.
fast,
Yeah, yeah,
I fast all
yeah.
day. I always say like that meal at the end of the day, I didn't eat all day. So now I'm like, I'm really going to enjoy and appreciate this meal. Where like, if I was just snacking and eating all day, I would take it for granted, right? Or if I was eating pizza every day, I would
Sure,
take
sure,
pizza for granted.
exactly. Yeah,
But because I don't
yeah.
eat pizza every day, that's
Human nature.
yeah.
It's basically human nature. You got to have some control over that. Some do, some don't, and there you go. But the bottom line is we're always chasing the next thing. We're always chasing.
Yeah.
You're never content. You always, that's part of human nature, in my opinion. And to kind of realize that is a major step forward. And I think you realized that early in life. That's great, man.
Yeah, I think I got lucky. I always said I was like an old soul, and for
No, I
some,
mean, I tell you, you love what you're doing. That's the greatest satisfaction is I talk to my sons on a very regular basis, right? I always end up the conversation. I go, listen, okay, you're doing this, you're doing that. Is this a two-way street? In other words, is the company treating you right and you treating the company right? Is it a two-way street? And are you satisfied with what you're doing? Do you get up in the morning? Do you dread going to work? That kind of deal. Or you're happy, because the company is treating you correctly. Therefore, you treat them correctly. Two-way thing. If you don't have that, it's
well, that's the thing. It's like, you get back what you give, and if there's times, I've sometimes with my kids, you're coaching kids, you're dealing with other people's misbehaving kids, and you're like, oh my God, I really want to just yell at this kid, and I'm like, okay, let me take a different approach, right? If it's my kids, if it's somebody else's kids, I'm like, okay, I could either yell at them, right, or I could be like, let me see if I can get them to laugh, get them to like connect with me in a different way. Let me, and you find these other approaches, and typically it works, and you're like, okay, if instead of giving out negative energy, let me try giving out positive energy, and maybe I'll get positive energy back. There's times where my daughter is having a temper tantrum, and my wife is like losing it, and I'm ready to lose it, and I'm like, you know what? Let me see if I can get her to laugh, and then I get her to laugh, and all of a sudden she snaps out of it. And everybody in the room is kind of smiling because we're like, we thought it was hilarious that she was having a temper tantrum, and then 2 seconds later she's giggling and she's smirking and she's trying to hide her laughter. And I'm like, look at that. I could have either handled that by like sharing more negative energy, or I shared some positive energy, and I got some and it's like, when I started the podcast, this whole idea of like the ripple effect, and I called it the ripple effect. I named it after a song that I wrote called the Ripple Effect, and it was this idea that we all can create a ripple, and you never know where that ripple goes. And I always used to use the example of like, okay, I get a call from my wife. My wife's in a good mood, right? And she puts me in a good mood. Then I get off the phone and I go to work and I have an interaction with somebody and I'm in a good mood. I share that good mood with that person. He has an interaction with somebody else. Or I'm like, or the opposite could happen. My wife would call me in a bad mood. She puts me in a bad mood. Like, what the hell is wrong with her? Now all of a sudden that negative energy, I end up sharing with somebody else, and he shares with somebody. Exactly. So it's like we can all start a ripple, and we all have control of that.
Exactly. Well, even something that's very simple, like, for example, a lot of times I'll go to a gym, right? And there's a guy in front of me. He opens it, leaves the door, opens the door and holds the door for me. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So the guy's happy. I'm very happy. Now, my attitude has changed when I go in the gym. It's like I'm happy. And the guy's content too. Or if you're in traffic, you let somebody go, by, kind of a thing. You're both happy. It changes attitude. It really simple things like that just.
It's funny. Right? I do that all the time. I'll hold the door for somebody who's like a mile away, and they're trying to run because they feel bad. Yeah. Like me,
next,
I'm like,
20 people go by, right?
And I'm always like, hey, I'm in no rush. Don't worry about it. I'm like, take your time. And it's like, they're like, oh wow, this person took the time. Like I wasn't even close, and they took the time to hold the door for me, anyways. And,
right. Oh, yeah.
And then
exactly.
you get a smile, and you're like, okay, yeah, like oh, I made them feel important, and then they smiled at me, so now I feel good because I feel like I did a good deed. And it's
just, both of you guys are feeling great, positive energy.
One of the most important things with your kids, it's like you can tell your kids to do all the polite things in the world, but the only way they're gonna do it is that if you do it, because kids don't do what you say, they do what you do, and that's why. What happens is that if they see you do it, then they think this is the way you're supposed to act. And so it's like it's so important to, and it's like it's just little ways and little methods of like sharing some positive energy. And again, you don't know who that person is. It could be somebody like yourself or myself who maybe I'm going through some bump in the road, some struggle in life.
But what? You don't care. You don't care. You should do a nice, pleasant. The guy could be a murderer, a mass murderer. but he opens the door for you. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's like a good deed is a good deed, period.
And it could help exactly. And
Yeah,
if I'm having a really bad day, maybe that simple act of holding the door for me and smiling at
right.
me, like maybe that helps like get me out of that slump. Like all of a sudden I'm
Yeah,
in a
yeah,
little
yeah,
better
yeah,
mood,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah.
Or
Yeah.
you can contribute to making it worse by not holding the door for me. Now I'm swearing like, hey, that a-hole. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I've held the door for that guy. Why didn't he hold the door for me? Like, so it's like those little things. That's why it is so important for people to
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt you again, but sometimes, like, I'm in a car and all that stuff, and I let somebody go by. Believe it or not, I'm expecting a wave, right? Don't you expect a wave?
I
If the
do.
person does a wave, that's bad energy, man. That's negative energy. I don't feel good.
It's funny you say that because I'm the same way. I'm
Yeah,
like, listen, if I let you,
yeah,
I'm like, is it that much work to just give me a wave to say, hey, you acknowledge the fact that
exactly, exactly.
yeah,
You just go, hey, that's it. Come on. The other guy
it's,
just goes right in. It's like I'm not feeling good. He's not feeling good either, obviously. Well, what's good about that?
and then sometimes you have to remind yourself that like it's not, I see with like playing sports. So I playing basketball in some like, tough areas in Springfield or Holyoke or Chicopee. And you find these kids who are just always starting fights, always causing friction, and you're like, what the fuck? What is wrong with this kid?
Yeah,
Why? It's like,
yeah.
is it me? Like, what is it that he's such an a-hole? And then you find out about like their background, right? There's this one kid that I would always butt heads with, and I'm like, we're gonna end up fighting one day, like, because every time we're playing basketball at the same place at the same time. I'm not taking shit from him. He has a bad attitude, and or whatever, and he ends up ruining my day. And then I find out that like his mom was like a crackhead, his dad, he doesn't know his
There you go.
dad.
Yeah.
And then you realize like, oh, okay, like this isn't like I'm mad at him, but he's not mad at me. He's just mad at the world. He's been dealt
Right,
some
right.
shitty
He's in a
cards.
bad situation.
Yeah, he's been dealt some shitty cards, and
Yeah.
it's not his fault. He has
Right.
he's
He's a
taking it out
kid.
on everybody because he doesn't know how to handle it, and he doesn't have anything maybe to
A
be grateful.
support system
Yeah,
or anything
support
like
system or
that.
whatever.
When he
Yeah.
goes home, there's nothing there. I mean,
Yeah.
just misery day in and day out.
So when I don't get that wave back when I let him in, sometimes I'm like, okay, maybe he's having a way shittier day than I have, and maybe his wife just left him, maybe he just lost his job, maybe
Right,
so.
right,
You
right,
try
right.
to give
Yeah,
people the
yeah, yeah.
benefit of the doubt, and I think that's really important too, to be able to be like, okay, maybe they're being they're putting out some negative energy, but maybe they're going through some really tough shit. Maybe give them a little bit of room to
Give him a little leeway in that
yeah.
respect. As long as he doesn't take advantage of that, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah,
Or.
without a doubt. So I know I've taken up a lot of your time. Is
Well,
there,
listen, Rick, it's a pleasure talking. Ricky, I should say, right? Ricky,
yeah, well,
you
yeah,
prefer
whatever,
Ricky?
whatever. We're friends. You can call me whatever you want. Well,
Oh no,
as an
no, yeah,
immigrant,
Ricky. And yeah, so by the way, you can buy the book on Amazon or bookbaby.com. It's available in like all over the place, basically.
do you have a preference on where people buy it? Does it matter?
Probably Amazon, mainly because people are inclined to go there right away. It's a go-to place. You know what I'm saying?
It's easy. Yeah, it's
Yeah, it's
easy.
easy. Like, oh, Amazon, here we go. That kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
deal. Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I'll put links in the show description. It's a super fast. I mean, obviously, I didn't read all of it, but just going through it, and knowing you, I've learned some stuff about you. You're going through the book.
Reading the entire book, Rick, you get a kick out of that. There's a lot of humor in there, sarcasm, kind of quirky things. But that's me. That's me.
Yeah, and when did you come to the conclusion that you wanted to write a book?
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. When I was in college, I took this English American Lit course, and we had to write all kinds of papers and this reviews of books and all that stuff. And I got one of my papers back, and the professor wrote that I had an unusual way of writing, interesting, and she goes, you should pursue this. That was a comment she made. It'd be a good idea to pursue this because you have an unusual kind of way of writing. That stuck with me and never left me actually until, I have time right now. So there you go. Mention that one person made a comment, a passing comment, and that was it.
Well, one thing I always say when I coach is, a good coach can change a game, a great coach can change a life, and that really
There you go.
highlights how you really don't know as an adult when you're around kids, like a piece of advice sticks with them forever. So you don't, it's really easy to take those little conversations and those compliments that you give the kids for granted, but sometimes that's the compliment, that's the conversation that stays with them forever and helps mold them, forever, and they're grateful
Yeah,
for
you're
it.
right. And it's been a few other instances like that, similar to that, that kind of stuck in my mind, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, you're coaching. I mean, I'll guarantee you, like, down the road, you're going to run into these people you coach and all that stuff. He's going to say, hey, listen, you've made a difference in my life. Let me tell you why. Blah, 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 blah. I mean, right? That's going to happen.
I hope so.
No, no. Hey, Rick, it's a pleasure talking to you, Ricky.
You too, Michael.
Rick.
And
I got two friends that name's Rick, so here we go.
Yeah, well, my full name's Ricardo, but like you, I was an immigrant, and I just wanted to fit in because I didn't speak the language very well, and so I'm like, hey, my name is Ricky because it made me sound more American. So
right, yeah,
but,
yeah, exactly, yeah.
But yeah. Last question: do you think there'll be another book? Do you think you're...
Yes. As a matter of fact, I'm in the process of writing another book. You know why? Because I don't consider myself as an author unless I write two books. I mean, one book is a fluke. I mean, when you write two books, okay, now you're an author.
But it's incredibly time consuming. I mean, I have so much.
You know what? It's very much time. The worst part is the technical part. Setting out for formatting, this and that, editing, and it's. But yeah, it is very time consuming because like I had like 5 different rewrites, and I read the book 1,000 times, and there's still mistakes in there. I noticed. But anyway,
but it's like
it's a process.
Yeah,
like you were saying before, it's a process.
And you know what? Are the most of the mistakes aren't going to change anybody's experiences. It's
no.
It's like the
but
musician.
You know what? I like that process.
Yeah, no, it
that
is.
Part I like. It's a whole different discovery. I mean, you do it and you go, wow, yeah, I like this.
Well, it's therapy, right? And you get to relive some of your...
You know what? Exactly. It is therapy also. That's another thing. And I would extend that therapy to other people that are going through similar things, this and that. And that's the idea, is to extend this to other people from a pedestrian point of view, from horse's mouth to you, basically, not some professor talking, blah, 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 that kind of deal. That was the idea.
Well, writing music growing up, one of my favorite things was writing the lyrics, because it would force me to have to tap into some internal things that maybe I was struggling with, or some internal things.
Exactly. You're right about that. I tapped in a lot of internal things that I go, whoa.
Did you? Were there some things that maybe you even forgot about until you started writing?
Yes. I wish I had written other things in the book that I just remembered or whatever. It would have made the book richer, so to speak. But there you go. It's like a frustrated artist. When's the painting going to be finished? Well, every time I look at it, I got to tweak it.
Well, you're right. Yeah, and you hear musicians say that, where they
yeah, exactly.
They have to, like, we have to stop remixing it and mixing it and editing it, because it's like it's endless at some point. And this goes back to how important the word content is. At some point, you just got to be content.
At some point, you got to say, okay, that's it. This is it. See you later. That kind of deal. Let it go.
And move on to the next journey.
Ricky, it's a pleasure talking to you. Thanks a lot for the opportunity.
Hey, thanks. I'll send you links to the show once it's up and live. I'm really excited to share your story and your book with everybody. And I'm sure I'll see you at the gym probably in the near future.
See you at the gym. Have a good night, Rick.
Hey, you too. Thanks, Michael. Take care.
Okay. Bye.